משומעים וראה כי היינו לגבור כלס הגויים נחשבנו כצאן לטבח יובל להרוג ולאבד ולמכות ולחרפות משומעים וראה כי היינו לגבור כלס הגויים נחשבנו כצאן לטבח יובל להרוג ולאבד ולמכות ולחרפות
ובכל זויס ובכל זויס ובכל זויס שמך לא ישכחנו ובכל זויס שמך לא ישכחנו אוי נו אל תשכחנו ובכל זויס ובכל זויס ובכל זויס שמך לא ישכחנו ובכל זויס שמך לא ישכחנו אוי נו אל תשכחנו משומעים וראה כי היינו לגבור כלס הגויים נחשבנו כצאן לטבח יובל להרוג ולאבד ולמכות
לגבוקרס הגויים נחשבנו כצאן.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Welcome, and tonight really is an educational opportunity as much as it is an opportunity to honor one of our greatest leaders, mentors, and individuals who shaped the Jewish world here in Toronto, in Canada, and the world around. It's really a tremendous honor to be able to sit here together with so many of you who knew Kurt Rothschild throughout his life, the family, Mr. Rothschild's family, his son Lenny, and his children, as well as Elka, who worked with, where's Elka? Who worked with Kurt for over 30 years. And so much of what we're going to speak about tonight behind the scenes, there was always Elka who was making sure that everything happened. So thank you. And it goes without saying that we have the tremendous honor, Lichvod Arav Harashi Yisrael, the Chief Rabbi of Israel, Rav David Lau, who is with us tonight and will speak more about what a tremendous honor that is in a few moments. Thank you very much for joining us. Kvod HaRabbanim, Mishpacha, Chaverim, our friends, family. It is really a great honor to stand here and speak about such a remarkable man who really touched the hearts and impacted so many of us. Every single one of us in this room, as well as countless more individuals, institutions, families were impacted by the work for many, many decades of Mr. Kurt Rothschild. It is almost immeasurable and impossible to count how powerful and how many people were impacted by him. From yeshivot, midrashot, day schools, kollalim, universities, programs, hospitals, everything across the Jewish world was touched in some way by the work of Mr. Rothschild. It is like a ripple effect that is endless, and in that infinite way will continue to impact us for generations. Only here in Canada, in Toronto, when we put together this evening, you can see over 30 institutions from across the communal spread got together to partner together and honor the work of Mr. Rothschild, because each one of them can honestly say they would not be where they were if it was not for his work. Kurt's devotion, his passion, and Mesiras Nefesh knew no bounds. He was a singular individual, and the loss of his leadership, guidance, devotion, and hand will be felt for generations. Who else devoted their lives to such a wide range of causes from all parts of the Jewish community? It was Kurt who united us all. The unity that we feel as a community was held together by his love of each one of us. He sought out people from all backgrounds to support and impact without discrimination. In the last few years, I had the tremendous zchut, Me'et Hashem, really a tremendous privilege to work closely with Kurt for a few years at the end of his life. And I had the opportunity to sit in, and he would grab me and bring me into so many meetings with different institutions and different causes. And I had the opportunity to notice several important messages. The first one was the urgency. Everything that Kurt did was urgent. Everything that he touched, every cause, every person, Every individual asking for help, every institution wanting to build a building, was urgent. It had to be dealt with now. Because the most sacred thing he can be doing with his life was to dedicate it to Avodat Hashem, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to Hashem's people, Hashem's Torah, and Hashem's land. The second was how he took responsibility. When somebody came to Kurt to ask for help, very often he wouldn't just give them a check, but rather he would take responsibility for the cause and say, let's get this done. Let's do it together. And he would call all his friends across, and he would pick up the phone and write emails and dictate the emails and send messages in order so that whatever needed to get done, he would get done. The cause he was devoted to was his responsibility. And the third was the diversity of causes and individuals and institutions that he would give to. It was hard for me to understand at first, who does Mr. Rothschild give to? What type of people? What type of institutions? Because I saw individuals from across the Jewish spectrum come into his office and ask, and he would accept each one of them, b'sever panim yafot, and the urgency of helping their cause. And at first it was confusing, but after a while it became obvious that Kurt was giving to his values. It didn't matter who you were or where you came from. If you were devoting yourself, if your cause meant helping the Jewish people, the land of Israel, and furthering the Torah education in Klal Yisrael, it didn't matter who you were or where you're from, Kurt was at your side. And I think that if you live your life where the priorities and the values are at the utmost importance in your life, then the people that you're working with or the type of people you associate with or the community that you're part of is secondary. The values are so important. At the back of the room, if you didn't have a chance, we put together a book of tributes from over 100 institutions, individuals who wrote stories and thank yous to Kurt for the devotion that he gave to their causes. And we split it up according to the values that were so dear to Kurt Rothschild, because those values were his guiding light. No matter what, if it meant furthering Torah, furthering Klal Yisrael, and furthering the Jewish people in the land of Israel, he was there. And more than anything, I think that tonight we have a lot to learn. We have a lot to embody, a lot to take in. Because now it is up to us to, in some way, as a community, come together and make these priorities our priorities. And make this devotion and this urgency to help Klal Yisrael, to build our community, to build Torah in our community, to educate children, to build the land of Israel. That is our calling at this moment. And we have to be as devoted and put those values at the highest of priorities. And we look to Kurt and his memory and his legacy as a guiding light to help us devote ourselves to those values.
Maaseh is a person that's above it. He's not just giving. He's making it happen. He's bringing others. He's getting the involvement of trying to make sure that it works.
He sold his business while in his 60s and devoted the next 40 years of his life to creating shidduchim with Baalei Tzedakah, primarily from his home in Toronto, Canada, with Mosdot.
He is very determined and serious about raising money and helping people to better their life. He never gives up.
He spent his time building yeshivas, girls' schools, hospitals, and literally towns. Wherever there was a need, he was there. And as someone told me yesterday, he was an Omer v'Oiseh. If he said it would be done, you could count on it being done.
And the Rebbeinu Shalom put him there that's where he died, so that he could go straight up from there, wrapped in the walls of this building, the Shaare Tzedek, which was the love of his life, and he devoted more time to it than to anything else.
The image of 1 million Jewish children that were slaughtered by the Nazis always remain with me. And I feel, therefore, that we have an obligation to do honor to their memory by working for the Jewish people and helping to guarantee their existence physically in Israel.
We would like to call upon Mr. Mordechai Rothschild, grandson of Kurt Rothschild, to address us this evening.
B'shus, Rabbi Rashi, and other Rabbanim. There are many factors that made my grandfather, who we called Opa, special. For me, I'm here as a grandson who at times had a front row seat to see how my grandfather, Kurt Rothschild, lived his life. I saw how he cared for his family, how he treated and loved other people, and how he felt an achrayus, a responsibility to help the Jewish people, no matter how they identified. A friend of mine once misunderstood a comment I made and noted that people like my grandfather are often not close with their family, as they are too busy or their mind is too focused on their communal responsibilities, so they lack warmth or time with their family. Whether that is true for other community leaders, I cannot say, and I suspect in many cases that is not a true statement. For my grandfather, this could not have been further from the truth. Opa was the most unique grandfather and family leader. He was deeply interested in what every grandchild or great-grandchild was up to. I truly believe that I was special to him. However, I can tell you that he knew what was going on in every grandchild's life, and he always saw the best in what they were doing. I grew up a few blocks away from my grandparents in Toronto, and my siblings and I went to them for Shabbos often. Friday night, after the meal, Opa would take me to the hall of the 9th floor of 120 Shelbourne and play soccer with me. Looking back now, I wonder how we would never get yelled at in that long hallway, kicking the ball, and often hitting other people's doors. I wonder how many people were annoyed by the noise. I can only imagine how it looked to others to see Kurt Rothschild playing soccer in the hall Friday night after a Shabbos meal. Opa was treated like a very important person by so many, but he never acted like he was important, and for sure not more important than anyone else. When you went to his Shabbos table, there would often be a mix of guests. You had some people who might have had nowhere else to go, some friends who lived in the building or the area, and sitting next to them could be the leader of a large yeshiva or important organization in from Israel that was also a close friend of my grandfather. Years later, I returned to Toronto married and had the opportunity to live near my grandparents once again. I had the zchus to sit next to my grandfather in shul and also walk him home almost every Shabbos morning. Occasionally, he would tell me that he wanted to visit someone along the way. And it was always someone younger than him, sometimes materially younger. That this person maybe should be the one coming to visit him was never something he thought about. He didn't view himself as more important than anyone else. He would stop by our home every Shabbos before going back to his apartment, and the great-grandchildren got complete focus and his full attention. In fact, more than once, he joined me and my son, Motzei Shabbos, at a father-son learning in shul, where there was always someone who wanted his time, and he truly felt the pressure to help the various causes or individuals that he was involved with that week. He prioritized time with his family. He was completely selfless and had no ego whatsoever. His lack of an ego was never more evident than when he was honored at fundraising dinners, which happened numerous times. He viewed those occasions as an opportunity to help raise money for the cause. It was never about the honor he was given. It was always about the responsibility he had to help the cause. When he would receive compliments in public, it appeared to me that he viewed it as humorous exaggerations. He did not feel like he was doing 1% more than was his responsibility. The last time I saw my grandfather was shortly after this past Pesach, when I had the opportunity to be in Israel for a few days. He was not doing so great at that point, but there was one day that he was feeling well, and we were able to have a really nice and long conversation. It happened to be Yom HaShoah. And while I knew in general how my grandfather would respond, I couldn't pass up the opportunity on asking him one more time what that day and what that meant to him. He started his answer with one word: everything. He expanded with what I had heard from him many times. He viewed himself as fortunate to have escaped Germany before the situation deteriorated further. And being from the survivors of that period, as we just heard him comment on the video a few minutes ago, he felt a responsibility to give his time, energy, and resources to help rebuild what the Nazis destroyed. While he invested his time and resources in many causes, he believed that Jewish education was the most important area for him to focus on. As some of you may know, he came to Canada on a ship that also had German soldier POWs. He told me there was actually barbed wire on the ship to separate them from the Jews. When he arrived in Canada, the Canadians were not happy, as they were expecting a ship full of POWs and did not know what to make of these Jewish refugees. He ended up spending about 15 months in an internment camp in Atlanta, Canada, where he was with many other religious Jews and was able to both learn while doing some menial work. He commented that they were given a job for half a day to cut trees. And he said in a humorous way, "I wasn't the tree cutting type, so they had me do some electrical work." While he would be involved in various organizations, clearly his passion was Torah education. Eitz Chaim and Bnei Akiva schools were the most important to him in Toronto. In Israel, there were various Hesder yeshivas, in particular Yeshivat HaKotel. There was a yeshiva in Hebron, Yeshivat Ofakim, Mechon Lev, Jerusalem College of Technology, among others. However, if there was a yeshiva that was in crisis mode, and as we know, every Jewish school goes through difficult financial times at some point, he did not wait for the call. He jumped. It could be Yesodei Torah, Lubavitch, it didn't matter. He would never say they should rely on their parent body or their board of directors, or perhaps think that ideologically they're somewhat different than his preference. He would jump in to help and often be the key driver behind the school securing the resources needed to stabilize the finances. I had the opportunity to have many conversations with my grandfather about charity, and his response was never impacted by the cause I was asking about. He respected that I might have interests that differ from his, and that didn't matter. One story to highlight how he approached community responsibilities was when a school that my son was in sent a letter asking if we would prepay tuition so they can cover their near-term expenses. I thought that while I might want to help, all this does is put a Band-Aid on a cut that will not be healed. It felt like a short-term solution that wouldn't solve the problem. I shared my thoughts with my grandfather. He said, "You're absolutely right. It's not a long-term help to the school. You should write a letter to the board explaining why you don't think this is a good idea and that you will continue to pay your tuition through the school year." He had one more suggestion, though. With that letter, you should also send in a sizable donation to help them through this period. At the same time, he was not shy to be more aggressive with me when he felt I needed it. I once made the mistake of venting to him when a certain cause was being pushy. I commented that this organization had many members who were capable of significant contributions and did not appear to be doing their share. His response was not soft. He simply did not accept that I should allow what someone else is doing to impact what my responsibility should be. My grandfather was not just someone who felt incredible responsibility to community institutions. Obviously, he did. But more unique was how he cared for each person on a level that is hard to relate to. This is, more than anything, is something we can admire and hopefully find a small way to emulate in our own life. Whereas his passion was in helping build up and supporting Jewish schools, his heart went out to anyone who needed help. His involvement in helping the people from Gush Katif, who were forced to leave their homes, was from the more ambitious projects he took on, and was an example of how his heart went out to people who were suffering. When someone would share their personal troubles with him, he felt it, and typically would work to help that person, either through contributing and raising the money needed, or making calls for whatever the need would be. My Uncle Michael, who was supposed to be here tonight and speak on behalf of the family, recently said over a story he heard of how my grandfather went to be Menachem Avel, the family of a Chayal that was murdered in a terrorist attack. I personally experienced a similar event. I was in Israel on a visit in late 2015 when there was a terrorist attack at the Gush Junction, and Rabbi Yaakov Dunn was murdered. Rabbi Dunn, who was an Israeli, had been a teacher at Chat in Toronto for several years. And with that Canadian connection, my grandfather felt an even closer bond and responsibility to go to the Shiva. My grandfather was in his mid-90s at the time and was not moving around as well, but never let that impact what he wanted to do or what he felt he should do. He asked me if I wanted to join him to visit the family and be Menachem Avel, as he had arranged for someone to drive him. While I obviously felt extremely upset and sad about what happened, I never on my own would have considered going to the Shiva. We went, it was not that close a drive, and it was during a lunch break and the family was resting. My grandfather sat in the room and waited. After several minutes, someone from the family, I think it was an uncle, came over to him and said, "I'm sorry, they're resting now." My grandfather simply said, "I understand." He saw a book for messages on the side table, walked over and wrote a note that he comes from Canada, lives now in Jerusalem, and is here to wish condolences to the family and share in their pain, and with that we left. Most people would feel uncomfortable visiting a Shiva house in such a situation, even more so when you do not know the people. For my grandfather, none of these thoughts entered his mind. I felt a little awkward walking in. For Opa, it was mandatory. He needed to show support and share in their pain. Similarly, I recall when I first went to study in yeshiva in Israel when I was 17 years old. The first year, my grandfather came for Yontif and called me to tell me that on Erev Yom Kippur, he goes to Har Herzl to say some Tehillim at the graves of the soldiers who are no longer living, and he invited me to join him. I remember how he would walk among the graves and he read the stones to see what it said about the different people. He saw a couple standing by a grave. Possibly it was the grave of their child or a sibling. He walked up to them, and while I was uncomfortable and embarrassed, he asked them, "Who are they visiting? Please tell me about the person." There are many stories I could share, and I'm not going to have time to say many more, but as I sat this weekend writing down notes on what to say, it was this story more than anything that brought tears to my eyes. I hope that some of what I shared can inspire everyone in their own way to take some lesson from the way my grandfather lived his life, and in this way tonight will be a merit for my grandfather and for all of us. Thank you.
I've built many yeshivas here in Eretz Yisrael. First I'll talk about Yeshiva Lakoto, right? Okay. The Ofakim, the yeshiva in Ofakim he built, and the Beis Yaakov in Ofakim he built, right? And he built the Hesder Yeshiva in Sderot and in Eilat, and Mechon Lev, he was, with Professor Lev, together with in camp, and he was close with him, and he backed him, and he started him off, and he brought in Mr. Bentheim, that's Mechon Lev.
Can't even dream of the tens of thousands of students in the Hesder Yeshivas in Toronto and all the schools all over Eretz Yisrael and Ofakim, wherever he went in Yeshiva HaKotel, in all these places, Beis Yaakov HaYosher, they have an education because he played a critical role in their organization, in their institution.
It is for the Kiyum of Am Yisrael to be first Abdei Hashem and Abdei HaUmah, and the students of Yeshivot Hesder lomdim Torah, they learn Torah, and they give service to Am Yisrael.
And he knows, because of his own background in Germany and what happened to us, he believes in education and Jewish education and frum education, and he believes in it 100%, and he'll do anything to solicit.
That is the future of our people. Without education, we are lost.
Mr. Rothschild was a founder and longtime partner of Bnei Akiva Schools. We are honored to call upon Rabbi Grauer, the Rosh Yeshiva and head of school of Bnei Akiva Schools, to address us.
Birshut, Harav Harashi, Moreno V'Rabbeinu, Rav Lau Shlita, honored rabbis and guests. The Medrash writes, Vayhi b'shalach paro, mashal lamaha davar domeh. What is it similar to? La'adam shahaya lo pardes, a person who owned an orchard. Amar lo chavero mechor liet hapardes hazeh. His friend came to him, and his friend said to him, please, sell me this orchard. Mechoro lo b'mana. The Medrash tells us that he sold it to him for a mana. V'lo haya yodea bal hapardes ma betocha. The owner of the pardes did not know what the orchard really contained. Amru lo, bekama macharta et pardes. They said to him, so how much did you sell the orchard for? Amru lahem b'mana. He said, I sold it for a mana. Amru lo, they said to him, yesh bo zaitim b'kof mana. You know that there are olives worth 100 mana within it. Gefanim b'kuf mana, rimonim b'kuf mana. Grapes, pomegranates, each one worth 100 mana. Mini b'samim b'kuf mana, v'chayim kol min v'min b'kuf mana. Spices worth 100 mana, and all sorts of different fruits, each of them worth 100 mana. Amru lo, they said to him, V'lo ha'ita yodea ma tamocher u'ma yesh bepardes? They said to him, did you not realize what you were selling and what was contained within this orchard? The Medrash goes on and compares the orchard to Klal Yisrael to make the point that Paro didn't realize and didn't appreciate fully what he had in the Jewish people until they were gone. And then, Vayihi b'shalach Paro et ha'am, after Paro sent out the Jewish people, he said, no, what a mistake. I want them back. You see, sometimes it takes a loss to really realize the true treasures that one has. And the Medrash comments that within Klal Yisrael, Paro didn't realize Kama ashirim hayu bahem, Kama chachamim hayu bahem. How many ashirim, wealthy individuals there were. How many chachamim, wise people there were. Kama bali umnot hayu bahem. How many talented individuals there were. Only after they were gone was their worth fully appreciated. Over the weekend, I had the opportunity to read cover to cover through this incredible tribute of 130 pages that Rabbi Ilan Mazer and his team at Mizrahi Canada put together to remember the great Mr. Kurt Rothschild, Zecher Tzadik Livracha. All I can say is, wow. Some of the ideas you're going to hear repeated, but you're going to hear them in slightly different ways, with different nuances. But as mentioned, and it's so true, the number of yeshivot and hospitals and educational institutions and mosdot, social service organizations, staggering. The variety is unprecedented. I was blown away in particular by some of the pieces that spoke about the care and love for those from Gush Katif in particular, including things as small as looking after and ensuring backpacks for children and Sukkot for families. I challenge everyone here to try to find some form of a common denominator or a consistent theme that runs through these organizations that Mr. Rothschild worked on behalf of. Absolutely impossible. What comes from this tribute book is the knowledge of the real treasures that we had within Mr. Kurt Rothschild. Mr. Rothschild was more than 100 mana worth of zaytim and gefanim and rimonim and besamim v'chein kol min v'min. I don't think I ever met anyone like him. Beli guzma. He cared about all of Klal Yisrael. Kama ashirim, kama chachamim, kama bali umnot were contained within this one individual. And I cannot do justice in any way to Mr. Rothschild. How could I pick one or two of a few hundreds of stories to share? A book will one day be written, which even that won't encapsulate this giant. So rather than pick a few stories, I'd like to try and emphasize a few overarching principles that pervaded everything Mr. Rothschild did. And in that vein, I'd like to compare Mr. Rothschild to perhaps the greatest leader of all time, Moshe Rabbeinu, and try to focus on three aspects of Mr. Rothschild's personality and extraordinary life. First, anivut. Torah describes Moshe, v'ha'ish Moshe anav me'od, and like Moshe Rabbeinu, though a bit less of a frontline leader, Mr. Rothschild was the epitome of humility. Never looking for credit, never asking people to give that he himself wasn't giving himself. And just as Moshe was the leader for the entirety of the Jewish people, so too was Mr. Rothschild across the entire broad spectrum, irrespective of whether or not they were secular, Chiloni, Reform or conservative or Orthodox. Even there, it didn't matter if you were Dati Leumi or Haredi. Mr. Rothschild was there to support. Second, his life mission. We read this coming Shabbat, Vayikach Yosef et atzmot Yosef imo. The Medrash comments, Alav hakatuv omer, Chacham leiv yikach mitzvot. Shekol Yisrael hayu oskim bekesef v'zav, uMoshe haya asuk be'atzmot Yosef. Chacham leiv yikach mitzvot, that the wise of heart will seize good deeds. All of Israel was focused on gathering silver and gold, and Moshe was focused on these atzmot, these bones of Yosef. Shne'emar vayikach Moshe et atzmot v'gomer Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu LeMoshe Alecha nitkayim chacham leiv yikach mitzvos. That Hashem said about Moshe, on account of you is this verse written. Mr. Kurt Rothschild, Alecha nitkayim chacham leiv yikach mitzvot. Who else do we know who would do the unthinkable and sell a profitable business in 1971 as a young adult, close to my age, and then devote over half a century to being enmeshed and immersed in Sarchei Tzibur Be'emunah? It's staggering. Mr. Rothschild literally spent every second of every minute of every day doing mitzvot. And number 3, we read in Perkei Avot, Emor ma'at ve'arseh harbeh, be soft-spoken, but a man of action. Moshe Rabbeinu, as we know, was not a professional orator, but look at what he did and look at what he accomplished. The comparison to Mr. Rothschild is obvious for all those who knew him. On a personal level, I didn't meet Kurt until he was 90. I was brought to meet him when I first came to Toronto. He had such a unique gift of making everyone feel so special by his singular focus on you when he was with you. He wanted to help you, and he followed up his desire with real and meaningful actions. He told me that he was going on Aliyah shortly, and he needed someone in Toronto to send people to who would help connect those in Israel with the community. He asked me if I would take that on. Over the last 10 years, I met with him countless times, and I spoke to him very often. And in that short period of time, the impact that he had on me personally was immeasurable. So many people shy away and run away from responsibility. It's stressful, it's all-encompassing. Kurt was the opposite. He took so much upon his shoulders. And I saw firsthand that even when he didn't have the strength to, it didn't stop him on any level. I'd like to close with a brief tribute to his Eshet Chayil of over 70 years, Mrs. Edith Rothschild. May she be healthy and well. A number of years ago, Kurt gave me a little beautiful red book that he was very proud of. It was called Life is a Bowl of Cherries If You Don't Swallow the Pits. There's no way Kurt could have accomplished in his lifetime what he did without his Rebbitzin. And in an effort to honor her and her incredible lifelong support, I'd like to close with 3 meaningful quotes from her book. Number 1, problems are there for only one reason, to be solved. If you think otherwise, You have the biggest problem of all. This was Kurt, the ultimate problem solver. No problem was too great, no task too small. Number 2, choosing happiness has nothing to do with your actual circumstances. I never once heard Kurt complain about anything, and he was always filled with such great and immense happiness. And number 3, it is not how old you are, but how you are old. Back to Moshe Rabbeinu, who began his life work at the ripe old age of 80. Can anyone think of anyone in their life who more closely resembled this superhuman feat, who accomplished more after 80 than Mr. Kurt Rothschild? A few weeks ago, I was in Denver for a conference run by Prisma, an umbrella organization for Jewish education. One of the speakers made the comment that, and I quote, "We are the ancestors of tomorrow." It was very profound and powerful. I've been thinking about it since. All I can say about Mr. Kurt Rothschild is that when I grow up, I would like to be like Mr. Kurt Rothschild. I would love to accomplish 1/10 of what he was able to do. What a zechut that would be. I had a grandfather who had about as much hair on his head as Kurt, and he used to quip that grass does not grow on a busy street. There was no busier a street than the head of Mr. Kurt Rothschild. Chacham leiv yikach mitzvot. He understood this so much more than all of us, and boy did he take mitzvot. And we didn't fully realize what we had when he was with us. Chaval al da'avdin velo mishtatchin. Yehi zichro baruch. Thank you.
The coordinator of the Israeli war of building Eretz Israel, building Torah.
Israel is the center of the world. To walk the streets of Jerusalem is a special privilege and really unbelievable. But we have to work for it. It doesn't come free of charge.
The Galil, the heart of Israel, is in great danger. And our pioneers of Yeshivot Hesder in Akko, in Fachon, in Nazareth Elite are here to maintain our Jewish presence, to give courage to the people in the area, and to be pioneers of Torah.
Because the Jewish people, having lost in our days, in my days, almost 6 million men, women, and children, will only continue to exist if we work for it, if we help building up this country, if we are loyal to each other and loyal to Israel. And I, a little older than you, join you in wishing this country success and progress in building up the United Israel. And it's a mixture of wanting to be here, identifying with our people, our country, and ending our lives at some point here in Israel.
Mr. Rothschild served as the president of Mizrahi Canada and of World Mizrahi for decades. Since his aliyah at the age of 91, he worked daily at World Mizrahi headquarters in Yerushalayim. We are honored to welcome Rav Doron Perez, the executive chairman of Mizrahi World Movement, to say a few words.
Birshut, the Chief Rabbi of Israel, Rabbi David Lau Shlita, Yishar Koach for making such a journey at such short notice to honor Kurt, Chashuv Rabbanim, the Rabbi of Sharei Shamayim and the Committee of Sharei Shamayim, B'chvar Achsani, Rabbi Taylor, Lenny Rothschild, Mordechai, and the entire extended Rothschild family. Of course, we wish Edith a refuah shlema, B'ezrat Hashem, and all the leaders of Mizrahi Canada, President Yossi Salman, Chairman Rabbi Seth Grauer, Executive Director Rabbi Ilan Meiser, and the whole committee for the wonderful work in putting this very special evening together. Community leaders, heads of organizations, ladies and gentlemen. I want to speak briefly this evening about what it means to be a gadol. What does it mean to be an Adam Gadol, to be great? And Rabbi Grauer spoke so beautifully about Moshe Rabbeinu, and I want to highlight the question of Rashi, of what it means to be in the Pshat, Adam Gadol. What does it mean to be a Gadol, a great person? Because Rashi notices, quoting Chazal, that there's a redundancy regarding our introduction to Moshe as a young man. We introduced to him after he has been weaned and fed by his mother and brought back to the Armon of Pharaoh, to the palace. It says, Vayigdal hayeled v'taviyahu lebat paro. And the child grows up and he's brought back to the daughter of Pharaoh, to the palace. And the very next pasuk it says, Vayhi ba'im imahem, and it was in those days, Vayigdal Moshe, and Moshe grew up. Says Rashi, I don't understand where he grew an extra centimeter. You just told me that he became a gadol, Vayigdal hayeled, he grew up. The very next verse you have to say again, Vayigdal Moshe. In what way did Moshe further grow? And Rashi points out that we're talking about a different growth. The first is physical growth, Vayigdal, height, age. The second is emotional and spiritual growth. What does it mean to be a gadol, Vayigdal Moshe? When a child is born, Rav Soloveitchik points out, we say, all of us know at the Brit Milah of a young baby boy, we say after naming the child, we give him a bracha, and we say a most unusual blessing. We say, Zeh katon gadol yeh, shkoyach. I mean, beautiful. Zeh katon, what katon yeh? Zeh katon gadol yeh, this young boy will be big. What does that mean? What is the bracha that we give a young child at his Brit? Now you are young, but maybe one day you'll be gadol. To be big, we simply have to look at what the verse says. Vayigdal Moshe. In what way was he now big? In what way did he become a gadol? Vayetzei elechav. He became great because the person who had, so to speak, been hiding in Pharaoh's palace, not knowing that he was part of the Jewish people, walking past these slaves, seeing all of the suffering, but not noticing it because he didn't realize it was relevant to him. When did he become a gadol? When he realized, Vayetzei elechav, he went out to his brothers. He was responsible for those around him. Vayar b'sivlotam, and when you see yourself responsible for others, you can't help but see. You looked yesterday, but you didn't see. 3 times it says in the verse, Vayar b'sivlotam, Vayar kienish, Vayar, 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 because when a person becomes a gadol, when they become big, they see themselves responsible for the lives of others, and they see things they didn't see before. And Rashi says so beautifully, what does it mean, Vayar b'sivlotam? I'm just quoting these 6 Hebrew words that Rashi says, Natan einav v'libo liot meitzer alehem. He placed his eyes and his heart to be with them, to see their troubles. That's what it means to be a gadol, a person who sees the needs of the community, sees that he can do something about them. No longer is he a katan. We all know that to be small means to see others as responsible for you. A child grows up and sees their parents running around them and their younger and their older brothers and sisters and their grandparents, and the entire world revolves around them. When do they become a gadol? They become a gadol when they realize the world doesn't exist to fulfill my needs. I exist to fulfill the needs of the world, to make it a better place. And incredibly, the Vilna Gaon says that when you look at the first time it says in the Torah the word katon v'gadol, Here you see exactly what these words mean. Where does it say for the first time in the Torah, Katon v'Gadol, regarding Shnei HaMarot HaGdolim, regarding the sun and the moon? It says regarding the big light was the sun, which ruled in the day, and the small one was the moon, which ruled in the night. And says Rav Soloveitchik, here you see what it means, Katon Gadol. What is the difference, of course, between the sun and the moon? It's not only their physical size, it's what each one represents. The sun represents that which gives its entire being as a ball of energy, which is simply there to provide the earth with its ability to live. It gives of itself. The moon has nothing to give of itself. It simply reflects the light of others. It is a makabel. It receives. That's why the moon is katon. It's not only small physically, it is small because all it does is receive from others. The moon, the sun, says the Gra, is great because it gives constantly. The moment we transition from being a katon to a gadol, from being small to being great, is when we transition from our lives seeing the world revolved around serving us, as to our lives existing to serve the needs of the klal. As Rabbi Grauer said, in my lifetime of all the people that I have opportunity to spend time with, I have never seen such Mesirat Nefesh, not only the amount of time, years and decades, but the deep care and concern. Natan einav v'libo liot metzar lehem. We had the privilege of, I also met Kurt just after, when he was in his 90s. For the last 7 or 8 years, I've been at Mizrahi. I'd met Kurt briefly before, but having been at Mizrahi and seen him literally almost to the age of 100 until Corona came, every single day, walking up the stairs and seeing the streams of people which would come on a daily basis, literally from north to south. You saw in the video Kurt speaking in Akko and Tfachot and Nazareth in the north about supporting these unbelievable yeshivot in the north. And in a day, he could go down to Eilat, down to Otef Aza, Naveh and the yeshivim around Aza, or to Sderot. And literally in one day, you could have people from all walks of life, from all sides of Israel, from the southern tip to the northern tip, and each person would present their case. And for Kurt it was, Natan einav v'libo liot metzara lehem. I know how difficult it was for Kurt and eventually for the family to have to stop people from coming to see Kurt when he just didn't have the ability anymore. He couldn't but not commit to want to do something about it. That's just who he was. In every fiber of his being, giving with Mesirat Nefesh to everyone, from every walk of life and from every part of Eretz Yisrael. I just want to end with 2 brief stories. One in where I live in Yad Binyamin, and one that happened last week. A friend of mine, Rabbi Moshe Hauer, who is the executive director of the OU. So we live in Yad Binyamin, and there are a few hundred families from Yad Binyamin which are Mefunei Gush Katif. And we know how much that pained Kurt and what he wanted to do about it. And one of the Rabbonim of the Yishuv there, Rav Yosef El Nakaveh, came to me and said after Kurt passed away, he said to me, when I was the Rav in Gush Katif, he said, and when we came out in our first Sukkot, we didn't have Sukkot. And Kurt made sure that every single family which came out of Gush Katif had a sukkah, as Rabbi Grauer intimated. And he said, I experienced that personally, and he told me to please mention that to the family, that how he personally experienced that. And I just want to share a story from last week in conclusion, and this really is thousands and thousands of stories like this. I mentioned to my friend and colleague, Rabbi Moshe Hauer, he was in Israel this last week, that I was coming to this occasion to pay tribute to Kurt. And he said, let me tell you one little story. He says, my father, of blessed memory, Rav Binyamin Hauer, was the head of Mizrahi in Montreal and worked very, very closely with Kurt. And he said he had the privilege of studying, and he studied in Ner Yisrael. And he said there, the Menahel of Ner Yisrael was a man by the name of Rav Naftali Neuberger. And he said once when he was learning in the yeshiva, Kurt came to see Naftali Neuberger. He was in Baltimore. And when he left, he said, this Rabbi Hauer said he experienced this personally. He said, Rabbi Naftali Neuberger started crying. He says, you don't meet people like this. He sees no color. He sees no ideology. All he sees is Klal Yisrael. And whenever he goes, Notein einav v'libo liot metzera lehem. I want to end and say, And I mentioned this at the, we had at Yeshivat HaKotel, in Sukkot, a special tribute to Kurt that Yeshivat HaKotel organized. And I mentioned one thing there, I want to say this in conclusion, that I saw in the name of Rav Soloveitchik in the book Birkat Yitzchak that Rabbi Ganek put together, as a student of Rav Soloveitchik, that he says in Parshat Shoftim, he says the role of a leader, the role of the king is first and foremost to unite the people. That is the role of the king. That's why it's the king who is the one who is involved in Hakel. It's not the Kohen Gadol, it's not any of the Rabbonim or the Nevi'im or the Shoftim. The person who brings the people together in Hakel is the king. And Rav Soloveitchik learns it from a diuk in the Rambam regarding a king. He says the role of a Jewish leader, especially a Jewish political leader, is to be a force of unity in the world. And that was Kurt's not only incredible Mesirat Nefesh, unparalleled, not only a care for Klal Yisrael, not only a care for every part of Eretz Yisrael, that people would come from every walk of life, but a person who was such a role model of what it means to be a unifier, a person who gave his life, heart, body, and soul to bring people together and to make a difference to the future of the Jewish people. What a privilege it is for this incredible community that Kurt is one of its finest sons. What a privilege for Klal Yisrael and Faset Mizrahi that we had the zchut of being able to work with Kurt, and may his incredible, towering personality, his Mesirat Nefesh for everything that is dear to Klal Yisrael, be not only a Melitz Yosher for Klal Yisrael, but also for his wife and for his wonderful family, and for all those who had the privilege of knowing him. Yehi Zichro Baruch.
In an op-ed piece in the Jerusalem Post on the occasion of Mr. Rothschild's 100th birthday, David Weinberg wrote, and I quote, "Everybody calls him Kurt, not Mr. Rothschild. He wouldn't have it any other way. He is modest beyond imagination, a model of respect for all Jews and towards all Jews, the deepest believer in Klal Yisrael, and the greatest practitioner of Kol Yisrael Arevim Zelazeh."
For the world, Jewish world community, that's him. Great care about everybody and everything. His great concern and love for everybody.
He helped everybody. He just didn't have no in his vocabulary. He always, anybody who came to him, anybody who approached him, whether or not he knew them or didn't know them, he wanted to help them. He was an outstanding Jewish personality. He really cared for Am Yisrael, for Eretz Yisrael, for Torah Yisrael.
About every Jew, old and young, as if they were his closest family. He respected everyone and shared in their joy and pain, a true nice of all chaveiroi.
It's amazing, you always hear about old people falling. And he didn't fall. He fell once back in Baltimore many years ago, but afterwards he didn't fall. And I was wondering, how is it shaykh? How is it shaykh they didn't fall? But then I thought to myself, you know what? He never let anybody fall. Whenever somebody came to him, it was an almana, or anybody who came to him, or any organization who came to him, he never let anybody fall. And he created malachim. And when he was older and he should have fallen, those malachim came and they held him up and they supported him.
Someone asked the first chief rabbi of Israel, Rav Avram Yitzchak HaKohen Kook, to define for them spirituality. And Rav Kook answered that spirituality means ruchnius, is defined by the inability to differentiate between big and small. In the physical world, there are big things, there are big deals, and there are small things. But someone who has a spiritual sense, who's connected to ruchnius, is somebody that sees not whether or not something's a big deal or a small deal, but is able to notice even the smallest things have tremendous, tremendous importance. A quick story that Rav Tarragon, the dean of Yeshivat HaKotel, said, of the overseas program Yeshivat HaKotel said, told me that there was once a time where Kurt was invited to go down to a yeshiva down south, and he went to visit, and it was the wrong day. And he ended up waiting around for an hour. It was before cell phones, and he was just waiting and waiting. He decided to go back. The Rosh Yeshiva felt awful that Kurt had came down. He called him up and said, please let me reschedule for you. And so he says, okay, I'm going to be back in Israel on this and this date. I can reschedule then. And the Rosh Yeshiva says, I'm coming to pick you up personally, and I'll drive you down. And he goes to pick him up. He drives him down south. And when Kurt gets there, he says, can I please see the office? And the Rosh Yeshiva says, the office? Well, I want to show you the Beis Midrash, the student. Like, why the he says, I want to go to the office. He walks into the office, and he goes to the secretary, and he hands her a chocolate bar. And he says, I'm sure that you got yelled at when I came on the wrong day. And I wanted you to know that there's really no hard feelings. And Kurt had an incredible sense of not only seeing the huge, massive institutions that he helped build, and the thousands of wonderful causes that he went after, but the individual was so important. And the truth is, today we have an incredibly precise model of this type of midos that we have for here, not only in remembering Kurt, but also in our honored guests that we are privileged to host at this memorial for Mr. Kurt Rothschild. As many of you saw, there was a change in schedule on Sunday, very, very recently. Unfortunately, Rav Yisrael Meir Lau, the former chief rabbi of Israel's wife, is ill, and we wish her refuah shlema. And unfortunately, he wasn't able to make it. The chief rabbi of Israel, who has tremendous responsibilities all over the country, one of the leaders of our entire people, saw how important this event was both to the Toronto Jewish community, to Kurt's family, and who Kurt was an individual. And the chief rabbi of Israel, Rav David Lau, literally stopped everything, canceled all his appointments, and flew in special for this event. And it's tremendous hakarat tov that I have, and that we all have, to be able to host Kvod Rav Rashi, Rav David Lau, here tonight. It's a demonstration of the greatness of the leaders of our people. We have the memory of Kurt, but with us here today, somebody who understands both in the tremendous work that he does for all of Klal Yisrael, but also the care and love that he has for one individual and one community it was important enough for him to drop everything and come and speak for us. So from the bottom of our heart, we thank you, Rav Lau, for coming and sharing with us words of Torah in honor of Mr. Kurt Rothschild, Zecher Tzadik Livracha.
Choshuv Rabbanim, the heads of Mizrahi family, these communities, and the rabbi, I want to share with you one point that I want to emphasize about the personality of Kurt Rothschild. All of us knows about the yeshivot and about all the things that he supports them. I want to tell you, to share with you a little story to explain what is, I think, something special in his personality. I was a child, 5th grade, in elementary school in Tel Aviv. It was 3 years after the Yom Kippur War. And I remember that we had a new teacher that came to teach us. I can tell you that his name was Chaim. You know, children are not bad behavior, but from time to time, children don't know how to do things correct and how to keep the values of others. And we paid attention that every time when we took the chair, we skipped the chair, we moved the table. You know, it's a small voice that you can hear. When we did it, we paid attention that the teachers, a new teacher, took his hand on his head and takes himself under the table. It was in the first time we didn't be sure that it's exactly the thing that he did. But in the second time, the third time, we understood that he, for us, you know, the first grade in elementary school, for children to make happy in the school, in the class, so we waited for the time that he started to speak, and after one or two sentences, one side in the class took the chair and he took himself. A few minutes after, he continued, and in other side of the class, another child, and you understand, children. And after a few minutes, he asks us, please, I know that even you are children, but I am sure that you can understand me. Please hear my story. You don't know anything what it means war. You don't know anything what it means that you lost your friends. You don't know anything what it means that you see the blood out from you or your friend. And I'm afraid. I can tell you the truth, he said. I'm afraid. And you remind me with the moving of the chair or the table, you remind me that I heard the gun, the bomb, I heard them, and because of that, I pray you that you don't need to know what about it, but please understand me, that I know I'm there. And this is the voice that I heard. I can't do anything with myself, only to take my head on my head, to close my ear and to wait after the bomb. I don't know why he said that we are elder to understand it. But after days, after years, we stopped it. But I understood that even he went out from the war didn't go out from him. He went out. It was 3 years after. He went out from the war. But the war was in his personality, he couldn't take himself out. Last parasha, last Shabbat, we read about that Am Yisrael went out from Mitzrayim. After 400 years, 430 years, Am Yisrael, Kodesh Baruch Hu helps us, and they went out from Mitzrayim. ותחזק מצרים על עם למהר לשלחה מן הארץ. The Egypt asked, please, go out, please. They waited till the morning because that Hashem said. And after that we read about it, we learn in last parasha about filling, about Korban Pesach, about the days in the futures that our children will ask us, כי יאמרו עליכם בניכם, מה העבודה הזאת לכם? כי ישאלך בנך לאמור. Our children will ask, and we need to tell them, והגדת לבנך ביום ההוא לאמור. After that, we are coming to our parasha, בשלח. ויהי בשלח פרעה את העם. After 7 days, we read about not יציאת ישראל ממצרים, but we read about יציאת מצרים from Israel. Last parasha in Bo, we read about that people from Israel went out from Egypt. But when they saw the people from Mitzrayim, they were afraid. They felt, so what can we do? This is a sea, this is Egypt. What can we do? And it was a time that every day we said it. וירא ישראל את מצרים מת על שפת הים. Israel saw that Mitzrayim died there. So, וירא ישראל את היד הגדולה ויאמינו בהשם ובמשה עבדו. Now they can understand that they have a future, that can go to sing and to think about Mikdash, the Holy Temple, Yerushalayim. Yes, now we can feel free because now this is our freedom, our day, that we feel that not only we went out from Egypt, we took Egypt out from us. Our personality, the personality of freedom, of people that feel out from Egypt. We read a lot about Kurt Rothschild. We hear a lot about him and very important things. But I think that if I want to emphasize the point that this is something special for him, not only tzedakah v'chesed, it's very important, of course, but we heard a lot about yeshivot, about ulpanot, about education, and the something special of his way to educate is to take not people out from diaspora, to take diaspora out from our personality, to make us Jews in our land, in our home. This is his personality. To be a teacher, to be someone that took the light and tells the people, come with me, to understand that this is the way we are Jews. We need to be proud about us. And we have a land, and we have Torah, and together the land, Torah, and as a nation, Jewish nation, this is a way that we need to be proud about it. And because of that, he is supported to chinuch in Israel, yeshivot, ulpenot, and to educate here and all the diaspora the way that to go and to come back to our home. He did it with silence. I didn't hear him any time took his voice up. With silent, with serious, with a lot of heart, that you feel that a truly man, this is truth, that he believe, he trust in all the things that he did. And because of that, we can't refuse to go after him. This evening is a time to remind ourselves his way, his personality, and this evening remind ourselves to continue this way and together to go with a lot of warm memorial for this personality that the not tall man, but big man. Yes, you said Adam Gadol. Yes, we had a privilege that Adam Gadol went with us. Now is our time to take him with us. Even his body is passed away, but his way go with us till 120.
Thank you very much to Kvod Rav Rashi, the Chief Rabbi of Israel of David Lau, for joining us, sharing with us such profound words of Torah and messages from all of our speakers. And thank you to each one of our speakers. The chairman of World Mizrachi, Rav Doron Peretz, thank you for making the trip, coming all the way from Israel to spread your perspective in the life of Kurt and how you worked with him so closely, and to share with us your words of Torah. Thank you to the Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshivat Bnei Akiva schools, Rabbi Seth Grauer, who's also the chairman of Mizrachi Canada, who is a constant guiding light and continuing in all the work that he does, continues in the legacy of Kurt, as well as to Kurt's family and Mordechai as the representative, who spoke with us and shared his family perspective. Thank you to all of you for coming. Thank you for all of you taking the time to learn about the life of Mr. Rothschild, of Kurt, who gave so much for us to be able to live in this wonderful community, who gave so much to build the state of Israel into what it is today. And it's really tremendous Azkara Tov that we have for all the work that he did. And these thank yous to the individuals who made tonight possible. We'd like to thank the sponsor of tonight's evening, the Barenbluth family, Dov and Nancy Friedberg, who send their warmest regards and their love of Kurt, who was a dear friend for many, many years, the Kashitsky family, the Rothschild family, Michael and Marsha Lax, the Sampson family, and the Silver family, all of whom worked very closely with Kurt on many different causes throughout his life and continue his legacy in a tremendous way to this day, and Bezrat Hashem ad mea v'esrim for many, many more years. After hearing all the stories that we did tonight and all the messages about Mr. Rothschild's life, I think that it puts on us a tremendous burden of responsibility. As we can see that if one man can make such a tremendous difference, imagine a community of people who live by these values and these priorities. putting Jewish education, Torah, Am Yisrael, the land of Israel, and our community first and foremost in their minds. This is our mantle to hold, to take that responsibility, every single one of us, to see our lives as devoted to others, to devoted to these values, these priorities, to these causes. And Bezrat Hashem, it will be Lezecher, all of our actions moving forward, and all of what we take upon ourselves and the responsibility to make Klal Yisrael better, to build the Torah of Israel, to Shubi, Li'ilui Nishmat, Gershon ben Mordechai, and as we know him, Mr. Kurt Rothschild. Yeh Zichro Baruch. For those who are interested, we will be davening Mariv here in the shul.
Mishomayim urei, ki hoyinu lagvokeles hagoyim. Nechshavnu kitzoin, latevach yuvo, laharoyu liyabed, ulemako ulecheripo. Mishomayim urei, ki hoyinu lagvokeles hagoyim. Neshavnu kitzoin, latevach yuvo, laharoyu liyabed, ulemako ulecheripo.
ובכל זויס, ובכל זויס, ובכל זויס, שמך לא ישכחנו. ובכל זויס, שמך לא ישכחנו.